All right, so new Toyota Prius coming down the road. Here is some footage for you so you can see what that looks like. Earlier, I also showed you the Toyota Crown. Here is some footage of that model so you can decide which one you like the look of the best. These are two of the latest and most cutting-edge examples of Toyota's hybrid tech on the road. Now, there is some overlap in the pricing between these two machines, as well as some very interesting differences and similarities when you compare them side by side. Watch the torque right off the line lift that front axle. There it is in the Prius, and here it is again in the Toyota Crown, and both of these hybrids, of course, using electric motors for instant off-the-line punch. And they're both all-wheel drive, but how does Toyota's very latest hybrid system work? How much gas will it save you? And how do these two latest Toyota hybrid cars stack up against one another? So this is the all-new for model year 2024 Prius, perhaps the first one anyone buys because of its styling, and after a week at the wheel, discovering its pros and cons, which we'll be covering in detail later in the test drive, it was really the look of this car, along with its fuel bill, that turned out to be my favorite thing about it. Starting price from $37,150 Canadian for the XLE trim grade and $43,250 for the Limited. Both are standard with all-wheel drive. Both get a new 2-liter Atkinson cycle 4-cylinder hybrid engine that's 196 horsepower and fuel efficiency of 4.8 liters per 100 kilometers, about 49 miles per gallon if you like, and thanks to that hybrid engine, that's the fuel mileage you'll be getting whether you're in stop-and-go commuter traffic or cruising the highway. Remember, hybrid engines get the most bang for their buck in the same sort of stop-and-go driving where regular engines are the thirstiest. The Toyota Crown is all new for model year 2023 with pricing from $45,590 in the XLE trim grade, and that is just a $2,340 step above the top-line Prius Limited, meaning that while their pricing doesn't overlap, the Prius versus Crown question will be a very real one for many shoppers. Then the Crown Limited comes in around $51,000 Canadian, and the Platinum makes it $60,000 with the punchy up-level Hybrid Max turbo engine. But for the rest of this video, we're comparing the Prius to Crown models with the standard engine, and the Crown's standard equipment 2.5-liter hybrid 4-cylinder engine and standard all-wheel drive is a very similar setup to the Prius, but the pricier Crown delivers 236 horsepower from its standard engine versus 196 from the Prius. That's a 40 horsepower advantage for the Crown. For the extra power, you need extra gas. The Crown drinks 5.7 liters of gas per 100 kilometers versus just 4.8 in the Prius. By the way, I've got a ton of math for you in the fuel cost analysis section of this video coming up. So with the Crown generating more horsepower and using more gas, is there a performance advantage over the Prius? I've got that coming up for you in the road test as well. So basically, you're looking at a pair of 4-door hybrid-powered all-wheel drive cars that you can do very nicely in for $50,000 or less. But which one is right for you? When it comes to the specifications, there's nowhere these machines are separated more than when it comes to overall length. The Crown is a full 15 inches or 38 centimeters longer than the Prius. That's a difference of over 8%. And the smallest difference between these two cars is actually front seat headroom, which is surprisingly a fraction of an inch from being a dead even tie. Elsewhere, the Crown's wheelbase is 10 centimeters or 4 inches longer, rear seat headroom is 1.1 inches or 3 centimeters better in the Crown, and there are similar advantages in rear seat, hip, and shoulder room. Up front, the Crown has a small advantage in legroom versus the Prius, and in the rear seats, that advantage grows considerably, with about 4 inches or 10 centimeters more than the Prius. All right, so this is my comfortable seated driving position at about 5'10". Come up here, James. You see I'm pretty much out of headroom right there already. The other thing to draw your attention to is this instrument cluster and steering wheel. What you can see from this angle is that screen is fairly small. It's fairly set back away from me. And we've got all this extra trim that leads up here to the steering wheel. The problem is, in my comfortable seated driving position, the top of the steering wheel here is actually cutting off a little bit of the bottom of that cluster. I just wish there was something a little bit bigger and easier to read. As well, a little bit more headroom in here would probably do pretty good too. Actually, less of a duck there than I was expecting. Haven't actually sat back here yet, so you're seeing my reaction to this for the first time. So behind someone at 5'10", here's how much knee room, leg room I have. Fairly generous, over a hand's worth of width here. That rear floor not totally flat there, not crowding my feet too badly though either. So let's check out the headroom back here again. I am just about out of room. There is just enough
if you're about 5'10". If you're any taller than me, probably not going to be having such a great time.
The Prius also leaves the Toyota Crown in the dust when it comes to cargo capacity. There's 23.8 cubic feet for cargo in the Prius and just 15.2 in the Crown. So that's over 36% more cargo space if you go for the Prius. While the cargo volume is more generous in the physically smaller Prius, and while I would tell you that both of these machines are pretty tight on front headroom, the Crown is by far the better choice for luxurious cruising with 4 adults on board, thanks to the more spacious rear seat and the far superior ride quality, which I'll explain about in the road test. So here are my main impressions after spending 2,000 kilometers at the wheel of each tester, with plenty of highway and backroads driving all across central and northern Ontario. When it comes to the drive, these two machines are separated the furthest by ride comfort and ride quality. In the Prius, the ride is smooth and planted on the highway, but louder at speed than in the Crown, and more susceptible to further increases in cabin noise levels when driving over more coarsely textured pavement. The Prius's ride is nicely done across a wide range of surfaces, with most disturbances on rougher roads coming in the way of noise, not harshness to the ride. Still, for the dollar, the Crown's ride quality is its secret weapon. It is much softer and more easygoing on rough and bumpy back roads without feeling sloppy. The cabin stays quieter more of the time, and ride comfort is more consistently maintained across a wider range of surfaces. I was particularly impressed with how quietly and smoothly the Crown handled backroads driving around Sudbury, Ontario, where it proved to have plenty of suspension travel, and that it knows how to make good use of it. Both machines put their torque to good use in stop-and-go driving, with the Prius's off-the-line and low-speed response becoming easier and easier to appreciate out of every traffic light. The Prius's lighter and livelier feel encourages the sportier drivers to dig deeper into the throttle, while the Crown's quieter and smoother driveline seems to do its best work when it's quietly surging you through commuter traffic. In both cars, and especially in sport mode, you'll feel the benefits of the electric motor torque boost on every drive. It can be a lot of fun. Still, neither engine sounds or feels as smooth as Honda's latest 2-motor hybrid system, which I'll be showing you in an upcoming test drive of the Honda Accord Hybrid Sport Touring. So be sure to hit the like button down below if you're watching on YouTube, and hit the subscribe icon so you don't miss that video. But specifically, the Toyota hybrid system is louder when worked, runs with a touch more vibration, though it is slight, and has no real meaningful sensation of shifting gears, and the engine isn't as pleasing to listen to, with the Priuses being particularly louder than the Crowns at full throttle. And despite the Crown's increased fuel consumption and advantage in horsepower, there is no performance difference to be had. The Prius and Crown both do 0 to 60 in a little over 7 seconds, and technically, the smaller, lighter Prius is the quicker car. In both machines, brakes felt more precise than I expected, though still a little vague and soft in certain situations, giving their hybrid setup away. On other test drive notes, I wish the Prius's auto hold system, which keeps the vehicle in place when you stop, so you don't have to hold the brakes, could default to on every time you start the engine, since I always used it. And the shifter is a bit fiddly, and the controls around it are a bit small and weirdly placed. So between the Crown and the Prius, it is the Crown with the far superior instrumentation of the pair. Here's some footage for you. You can see vivid colors, nicely animated, clean, bright, large, segmented logically, and very easy to find what you need at a glance on a display that looks really good. And so here's the Prius for comparison. So if I zoom in here, you can see that instrument cluster is much, much smaller. There's my hand for reference, right? So that entire instrument display panel is just a little bit bigger than the palm of my hand, and the positioning behind the steering wheel is a little awkward too. So here's what I mean. From where I'm sitting, we've got the steering wheel up close here. We've got that small little instrument cluster panel really far up and away over there. Problem is, from my comfortable seated driving position, if I want to see that entire instrument cluster, I either have to lower the steering wheel to a point where it feels a little bit awkward, or actually tilt the seat forward to a point where it feels just a little bit awkward. So in the Crown, much easier to get into a comfortable driving position, and one that lets you see the entire instrument cluster screen. So to me, if you're doing a lot of long distance driving, you will definitely appreciate the instrument cluster display in the Crown a lot better than you'll appreciate the instrument cluster display here in the Prius. So these are the various displays that drivers can call up to monitor the hybrid system in the Prius or Crown, which both work the same way. As you watch this sped up footage, notice a few things. The green EV light in the lower left comes on when the gas engine turns off, which shows we're not using any gasoline. When that EV light is on, you'll notice the engine icon is dimmed out as well, showing us that the engine is off. So the engine can be on, or the EV light can be on, but not both. You'll often see this during periods when the speed of the vehicle is decreasing, whether by coasting or braking. Here you have wheels that are spinning but not being powered, so those spinning wheels drive the electric motor instead of vice versa. And the motor becomes a generator that's driven by the wheels, and that makes electricity for the battery. And that's why in this footage you'll typically notice the instrumentation turning blue on the downhill segments of the highway, or when I'm coasting or braking, generating electricity for the battery every time. You'll also notice the battery doesn't get full or empty, it's constantly switching between charging and discharging. So the battery level always sort of hangs out right around the midway point. The electricity in that battery is used to help drive the car, either in EV mode or in sync with the gas engine, where the electric boost from the motor lightens the workload of the gas-burning part of the powertrain, which saves fuel and also smooths out the performance, while fattening up the torque curve, and that's when we see orange or red-colored lines in the animations, with power flowing to the wheels. And also when the engine is running to recharge the battery if regenerative braking is insufficient. So the battery charges up automatically as you drive around, there's nothing to plug in, and it is a constant cycle of making and then using its own electricity to help with driving the car and reducing the gas engine's workload and therefore fuel consumption in the process. And if that was the most efficient and informative explanation you've ever seen on how a hybrid works, please drop me a like and tell me what you think in the comments section if you're watching on YouTube. So let's run some math on the fuel costs of these two vehicles. If you drive 25,000 kilometers per year and pay $1.50 for a liter of gas in Canada, then based on their combined fuel consumption ratings, that's an annual gas bill of $2,137 from the Crown and $1,800 from the Prius, making it about $337 per year, or just under $30 a month more expensive to feed the Crown than it is to feed the Prius. Or if you like, the Crown has about 20% more power than the Prius, and also uses about 20% more fuel, so it all checks out. So if you're considering a Crown as an alternative to a Prius, just allow for another $30 a month or so to your gas bill.